where the Engineers Board of Kenya had its annual convention in Meru County to deliberate on the status of their sector and also to look at ways of further improving engineering standards in the country. While KTN's George Maringa was at that event and had the following conversation with the chair of the board.
In studio, indeed, the Engineers Board of Kenya is holding its stakeholders forum here in Embu, which is, the entire central and eastern region. Remember, they have been holding such forums to sensitize engineers across the country, and it is now the turn for those in the central and upper eastern region to experience what they have to be informed about the Engineers Act of 2011, something that is pertinent, considering that the engineers play a pertinent role in development in the country, regarding because of the Big Four agenda that the president announced. So they are in line with that. And just to expound on this, I will speak to the chair of the board, who is Engineer Wanjao, to just give us more information on what this forum specifically means for engineers. Thank you very much for joining us on KTN News. Now, we have seen in the past employers employing people who are not particularly registered with the board, that is the EBK. First of all, what is this forum about that you have brought to Embu?
Thank you. The Engineers Board has got a mandate to regulate the practice of engineering in the country. This was a realization of the old act, which was enacted in 1969, and the board's mandate then was only to register engineering practitioners. Now the board has gone out to bring to the notice and sensitize the Kenyan public, both the employers and the users of engineering practitioners. We feel this is the fifth workshop that we are having within the country, and we want to interact with our stakeholders who engage engineers, who use the services of engineers, and also under the new constitution, there's the devolved function of provision of services to the county government.
So in the past, we have seen, people or employers employing engineers, and later on, should something go amiss, for example, buildings, they turn to you people. But when you go through your records, you find out that, the engineer who was involved has not been registered with your board. How then do you, bring, clear that conflict?
Thank you. Under the new Engineers Act of 2011, there are provisions that have been set up both for the users of engineering services and the practitioners. For those who use the service of engineers, those engineers are registered by the board, and the board now has got a new mandate, not only registering professional engineers and the graduate engineers, the board now is registering even consulting engineering firms, such that whoever is going to engage the services of an engineer is regulated under this act. In past, as I mentioned, when you had the old act of 1969, it was not an offense for somebody to engage or receive services of engineering nature from somebody who was not registered by the board. Invariably, we as a board, we want to create synergies with the people who use the services of engineers. And we also now try and interface with them so that they know what engineering services are and who to be engaged in the provision of those engineering services.
So talking about, engineering and the whole engineer concept, let's talk about the fresh talent that is coming out of school. And, we have recently witnessed, high unemployment rates in the country. How then is the Engineers Board of Kenya addressing this issue of unemployment, especially to provide, because young talent is coming out in large numbers and they need to provide services to, Kenyans, but also there is also the limited space and competition.
Thank you. The board has now developed what we call graduate internship program, so that the board will be rolling out that program from the next financial year, where the fresh graduates who have gone through programs that are recognized by the board will be offered an internship for at least 2 years so that they become professional engineers. Taking into account that there is a big number of graduate engineers who are leaving the universities, the board has taken that mandate and shared with the government the predicament of not having structured training programs for graduate engineers so that they can become professional engineers. Because it's an offense to employ a graduate engineer who is not being supervised by a professional engineer so that they can be mentored. So in this forum, we are creating synergy so that we can have mentors of young engineers who are not registered as professional engineers, so they can be mentored, so they can become professional engineers. Any works on engineering which is not supervised by a professional engineer, both the employer and the owner, they are comparing an offense.
Okay, now, and going now back, finally, as when we wind up, there is the issue of universities that are offering courses that were not sort of recognized by the board, and we did see you coming in. There were those who asked what happened to, or what happens to those who studied, those courses that were sort of scrapped off, or those that were not recognized.
Thank you. You can't run away from a problem. As engineers, we look for solutions. We sought for solutions, and we have addressed that problem. And in the course of time, we have been able to solve that problem, and where there are teething problems, we have offered solutions. Under the Act, there is a provision of having a virtual school of engineering. If there are deficiencies in a program, we can advise or look for ways on how to address those issues. This is our manpower that we have in Kenya, which should be properly utilized, but maintaining standards in terms of professionalism. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was Engineer Wanjau, who is also the chair of the Engineers Board of Kenya, just giving us a perspective of this stakeholders forum, which involves engineers which has drawn engineers from the central and upper eastern region, which is particularly happening here in Embu. And it will be good news for engineers because they will be taught more or be informed on the Engineers Act of 2011, which should guide them in their mandate to deliver their services to the country. And also he has spoken of the new talent that is coming out of universities and how that will be harmonized regarding notably because also of the increasing or the demanding market, but also there are fewer opportunities in the country. Back to you in studio.